Friends, I want to begin my remarks this evening with something of a confession. There are times, and those of you who know me well may not believe this, that as I'm thinking about what to say in my Devar Torah, in my sermon on a given evening, that I have no idea what to say. And the reason is that there are times, I'm sure you experience this too, when there are so many thoughts going through my head and so many conflicting thoughts that I find it difficult to find a path forward. And also, there are times when the emotions are so raw that knowing what to say and how to say it becomes very, very difficult. You also won't be surprised, though, to learn that I have discovered how to continue and what emotions to express and how. And I guess for the third surprise, I know how to do it. And that is to take a look at the Torah portion of the week, which surprisingly always has something to say to the situation in which I find myself. This is pretty remarkable. If I weren't a monotheist, I would call it magic. But there it is. And as I looked at the Torah portion in search for a path forward to give some organization to my ideas, my thoughts, and my emotions, I found the beginning of this week's reading to be extremely illuminating. And I want to read it to you, and then I want to make a couple of comments about it, and then indicate how I want to move forward with it. This is the story that begins in the middle of chapter 28 of the book of Genesis. Each Torah portion has a name. The name of this portion is Vayetze. We take the name from the first word or the first significant word. That is a word that doesn't appear over and over and over again, like Vayomer, and he said. That happens thousands of times, and we couldn't name a portion Vayomer. We wouldn't know where we are. Jacob is escaping from home because having duped and manipulated his brother Esau twice, and also their father by pretending to be Esau, Jacob knows that his brother is enraged and bent on revenge. And so he runs away from home, and this is where our Torah portion starts. Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. He came upon a certain place and stopped there for the night, for the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of that place, he put it under his head and lay down on that place. He had a dream. A stairway was set on the ground, and its top reached to the sky, and angels were going up and down on it. And the Lord was standing beside him, and he said, I'm the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. The ground on which you are lying, I will assign to you and to your offspring. Your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All the families of the earth shall bless themselves by you and your descendants. Remember, I am with you. I will protect you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Jacob awoke from his sleep, and he said, surely the Lord is present in this place, and I didn't know it. Terrified, he said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the abode of God, and this is the gateway to heaven. Early in the morning, Jacob took the stone and put it under that he had put under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He named the place Beit El, Bethel, but previously the name of the city had been Luz. And now Jacob does something shocking. Jacob then made a vow saying, what's shocking is the next word. If God remains with me, if he protects me on this journey that I am making, if God gives me bread to eat and clothing to wear, and if I return safely to my father's house, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone which I have set up as a pillar shall be God's abode, and of all that you have given me, I will set aside a tenth for you. What do we have here? We have Jacob in crisis. And as the story unfolds, we feel Jacob's anxiety. Jacob is alone. It's nighttime. He's in a strange place. He uses a stone for a pillow. You remember that? He takes a stone and lies his head on it. Having a stone for a pillow is not the best way of assuring a restful night's sleep. And Jacob, therefore, has, I want to infer, his sleep disturbed as well. He's anxious when he's awake, and he is restless when he's asleep. But he does have a dream, and that dream gives him hope. God's promises to him, and the very fact that God has appeared to him at all is a sign of hopefulness. And then he names the place Beit El, the house of God. But as I pointed out when I read the last sentences, Jacob made a vow, if God remains with me, even though Jacob is feeling grateful for some of the things that have happened to him in the context of his anxiety, nevertheless, Jacob doesn't fully believe it. And he challenges God. I'm just not going to be your person automatically and forever. I'm going to put a condition on it. Jacob has some skepticism. That is, whatever it was or is in the dream that lifts his spirits, he is still filled with doubt and still filled with anxiety. And he trembles, vayira, and bargains with God. So Jacob here, in just a few verses, is represented as feeling many things at once, and feelings that are in conflict with one another. He feels fear, loneliness, anxiety, doubt, panic, along with hope, along with the power of the divine presence. And in the long narrative that follows, and you may know that of the 50 chapters of the book of Genesis, Jacob is central to half of them. The book of Genesis focuses on Jacob as it does on no one else. And as you also may know, Jacob has his name changed, or more precisely, he gets an additional name because he continues to be called Jacob as well. Yisrael, Israel. And that's who we are. We are Israel. We are the descendants of Jacob. What happens to Jacob happens to us. One great medieval Bible commentator, Nachmanides, says that the deeds of the ancestors are signs to their descendants. When we read the story of the patriarchs and the matriarchs, we are reading our story. And what Jacob is feeling here, and as he feels to the end of this narrative, is one trouble after another. Namely, the travails that have brought him to this moment continue to the very end of his life. And when finally, many, many, many years later, he is brought down to Egypt where his family has gone, and Joseph brings him to Pharaoh to introduce him to Pharaoh, Jacob says to Pharaoh, "Not only have the years of my life been few and hard, but I have not and will not have the privilege to live as long as my father and my grandfather. Life, in other words, has taken its toll on me, but here I am with my children and my grandchildren, a mixed set of blessings and problems." And this is why, when I was perplexed about how to address an issue tonight, this is why I feel, as I regularly do, that this Torah portion is exactly the right one for our time. Perhaps you agree with me that we are today beset by a variety of conflicting emotions and conflicting realities. Yesterday was Thanksgiving, and a day on which we express gratitude for our blessings. And we are bound, we are obligated, no matter how much things may be problematic for us at this time, we are obligated to reach beyond our difficulties and discover and assert how lucky in many ways we are. Gratitude for family, gratitude for friends, gratitude for our communities, gratitude for our health, gratitude for our rights as Americans. The gratitude is real because we do have our blessings, however challenged our lives may be. The Hebrew phrase for gratitude is hakarat hatov, the recognition of the good. Gratitude is not just an emotion, it's not just a subjective assertion, it's also based on the knowledge and the acknowledgement, knowledge and acknowledgement about what it is that we have. On the other hand, like Jacob in our Torah portion, we feel anxiety about the shape of things in our world today. The war between Israel and Hamas, the brutalities, the inhumanity, the barbarism, what human beings are capable of doing. It has always stunned me when I think about the possibility, and down through history, the reality of one human being facing another and nevertheless able to act like an animal to that human being. It's sobering to think of what we can do to one another. So much suffering, the intractability of this conflict between Israel and parts of the Arab world. We think about the 15th or the 14th century and the 100 Years' War, and we ask ourselves, how can a war go on for 100 years? This war has gone on for more than 100 years, and it is time for it to come to an end and for us to arrive at a solution to the problem. Now, we are also, on the other hand, grateful, aren't we, for the return of hostages and the promise, the hope that more hostages will be returned to us. But the conflict is only at this moment on hold. And these emotions, these conflicted emotions, find its reality in so many different places. We want the great hatred of Israel, which has gone on now for so many decades, and the anti-Semitism that continues once again to raise its ugly head, causing us to wonder, will it ever fully go away? Or does it just from time to time go underground? This causes us anguish and it causes us anxiety. There is also, closer to home, the problems that beset our society, and especially our current politics. Colleagues in Congress treating each other as enemies, and this poison seeping over into the very streets of our cities, rather than colleagues with differences treating each other as partners. Then there's the brutality of our language. I just said a comment about the Ahava Rabbah prayer, that we, through our words, can shape our reality. And we know that, to quote the philosopher Martin Heidegger, that language is the house of being. Language doesn't just reflect reality, it makes it, and it makes our reality. And therefore, we have to shudder in horror at terrible, poisonous, destructive language. And I'm going to quote, and I thought of not doing it on Shabbat here in the service, but I think this has to be called out, and called out from the pulpit, the so-called Thanksgiving letter, which President Trump posted yesterday on Truth Social. And I'm just going to read a couple of sentences of it to indicate how much we as a society have sunk. And it's not just Donald Trump, it's his followers and those in authority who do not have the nerve to call it out. And here are these few sentences. Happy Thanksgiving to all, including the racist and incompetent Attorney General of New York State, Letitia Peekaboo James, who has let murder and violent crime flourish and businesses flee. The radical left Trump-hating judge, a psycho, Arthur Engoron. We have much to be anxious about, even as the mood of Thanksgiving still echoes in our hearts and echoes in our soul. Like Jacob, we feel our blessings and we feel our anxieties, and the one does not vanquish another. And so we feel this variety of conflicting emotions: gratitude and fear, hope and doubt, and most of all, a deep anxiety that will undoubtedly not soon go away. But we must, and I emphasize the word must, we must be optimistic, because pessimism will lead to cynicism, and a life of cynicism is no life at all. And so, in conclusion, I want to appeal to the words of the great Jewish theologian and poet, Abraham Joshua Heschel, who said two things that I'm trying to put front and center in my own consciousness. And here they are. First, Heschel says, I am an optimist against my better judgment. All one has to do is look around, as I've tried briefly to do, to see that things are not rosy. And so optimism is not something that flows from much of reality, but needs to flow against it. I'm an optimist against my better judgment. And finally, Heschel says, I insist on living on the heights, lest I sink to the depths. I insist on rising to optimism, for if I don't, I'm going to sink to the depths of despair. Like Jacob, negative emotions, fears, worries, anxieties, and positive emotions. God is in this place. There are promises. There are hopes. We have to recognize that both realities are true, but that we're going to lean toward hopefulness in times of difficulty.